Despite the heavy rain and strong winds, a young boy was clinging to the outside of a tall building. But actually, it was much safer out there than inside that room, because his mother inside had been murdered by thugs. A few minutes earlier, the mother had rushed back to the office in the pouring rain, but she was horrified to see her son there. Sang Pil had come running because he missed his mother, only to find himself in her way. The mother quickly wrote down his younger brother's address on a photo and told him to seek help from his uncle if anything happened to her. Then, she urged him to hide. Soon, she was surrounded by a gang of thugs. They interrogated her about the memory card containing the crimes of the big boss. The mother refused to say anything, but Oju, with his sharp eyes, spotted the child's umbrella. He knew the lawyer's son was there, so he threatened the boy's life. If the boy didn't come out, his mother would be in danger. Sang Pil, worried about his mother, pushed open the door and ran out. Oju smiled, confident of victory, and hugged Sang Pil's head while looking at the female lawyer. To ensure her son's safety, the mother was forced to hand over the memory card, but the thugs had no intention of letting them go. While Oju was asking the person behind it all how to deal with them, Sang Pil quickly swallowed the memory card. The mother also took the opportunity to hold off the thugs so her son could escape. As a result, she was fatally stabbed in the stomach. Sang Pil, in pain, escaped. Luckily, he met a patrolling police officer, Hyung Man, so he rushed to him for help. Unexpectedly, the officer was also on the same side as the thugs. Fortunately, the boy quickly realized the danger and bit Hyung Man's hand hard, causing him to lose control of the steering wheel, and the car overturned. Thanks to that, the boy escaped. Knowing that the law couldn't win against money, even though he became a lawyer later in life, he didn't like the law very much. He was speeding recklessly on the road. When the police stopped him, he immediately showed a few wads of cash. The police then led Sang Pil to a hidden spot out of the camera's view to receive a bribe. However, Sang Pil refused to give them his business card and didn't hand over any money. His car was not only speeding, but also had a rear-end camera. It recorded everything clearly, both the video and audio, of the police demanding a bribe, leaving the officer speechless and defeated. After teaching the corrupt police officer a lesson, Sang Pil quickly went to rescue his client. He was an accountant for a gang, but he had been manipulating taxes for personal gain. Unexpectedly, they had discovered his deception and were now being beaten. Suddenly, a car crashed through the door. Sang Pil got out of the car with his phone on camera, recording the evidence. He also introduced himself as the lawyer for the accountant being beaten. Thugs settle things with their fists, not with legal documents. So Sang Pil's handsome face was punched quite hard. Because his mouth was stained with blood, he had a legitimate reason to retaliate against these people in self-defense. Sang Pil smiled and took off his vest. That smile didn't fade when someone dared to threaten him with a knife. Playing with a knife carries a 5-year prison sentence, or at least 2 years, so put the knife down. No sooner had he finished speaking than he subtly snatched the knife from the other man's hand in less than a second. Then, he returned the knife to his opponent. Sang Pil then ordered his subordinates to provide concrete evidence of Boss Choi's tax evasion 5 years ago. He would be fined 2 billion won by the tax authorities, but now the accountant only embezzled 800 million won. So Sang Pil advised Boss Choi to spare him so he wouldn't lose 2 billion won and go to jail. Boss Choi was a little scared, so he decided to kill anyone who dared to threaten him. Suddenly, a powerful voice rang out. A man in a coat, accompanied by a group of henchmen, walked in under the glare of car lights. Following them were 4 cars carrying women, proving this boss was far more powerful than Boss Choi. Even more significantly, this man was Sang Pil's uncle. Therefore, Boss Choi could only remain silent and let the matter slide. Meanwhile, at a domestic violence trial, Jae was defending a wife who had been abused by her husband. However, the judges, who despised women and had accepted bribes from the husband, handed down a harsh sentence to the wife. Jae was furious on behalf of her client. Before she protested, she was just a mother trying to protect her daughter, even suffering broken ribs from her husband's beating. And now, the law couldn't protect the vulnerable? The trial was over, but Jae couldn't rest easy. What did it mean to confront the judge fairly? This man clearly despised women, and even a female lawyer like Jae. He told her she couldn't do anything, so she punched him in the face to prove she wasn't easily intimidated. She was immediately stripped of her license for 6 months. On the day Jae was reprimanded by the Bar Association, the judge she had assaulted also hobbled to the scene on crutches. He thought she would protect him, so he berated Jae. Yet, when she approached him, a mere wave of her hand terrified him. As a result, she went from a suspended lawyer to a dismissed lawyer by the Bar Association. Sang Pil wasn't afraid of gangsters because he was very strong. Just after leaving the gym, he received an anonymous package containing black money, but the contents didn't make Sang Pil happy. Soon after, news broke that the city mayor had been murdered. The suspect was arrested, but Sang Pil suspected he was just a scapegoat. The trial would take place in Sang Pil's hometown. The female judge in charge of the case moved Moon Suk held a grudge against him. That night, Sun Pil told his uncle that he had decided to return to Ki-sun to open a law office, also to reinvestigate the responsibility related to his mother and Judge Choi. He drove back to his hometown that very night. Coincidentally, Jae-yi had been fired from her job in the city and also decided to return to her hometown to live with her father. Her hometown was Ki-sum, but unlike Sun Pil, Judge Choi was Jae-yi's idol. Thus, a train and a car traveled side by side, but their destinies began to intertwine. A normal person would choose a law office in a civilized and respectable place, but Sun Pil was different. He targeted the hideout of a gang of loan sharks. He intended to take over this place as his office and conveniently recruit more followers. With an extremely confident and capable expression, Sun Pil entered the enemy's territory. However, the people inside were busy preparing for their Hawaii vacation, so it was only after a while that they noticed Sun Pil's arrival. Actually, this used to be his mother's law office. His name, engraved on the desk, was still there, but now it had been turned into a money-lending business. So Sun Pil gave the thugs time to move out. Seeing someone brazenly trying to take over his place, the gang leader ordered his henchmen to close the door so he could deal with them. Unexpectedly, the person being dealt with was one of his own men. It didn't take much, just the head of Department Tae, Sun Pil's right-hand man, handled everything cleanly. Thus, the gang accepted Sun Pil as their superior. His law office was opened. Meanwhile, Jae-yi returned to live with her father, but when her father learned of her dismissal, he wasn't surprised at all because he knew her hot-tempered nature all too well. A few days later, the trial of the mayor's murderer took place. Both Jae-yi and Sang Pil attended. Jae-yi was a loyal fan of Moon Suk, while Sang Pil hated her intensely. But indeed, this woman was a very skillful judge. Her sharp arguments and skillful defense earned her the respect of the mayor's murderer. This greatly impressed Jae-yi, a female lawyer who had previously been unable to voice her opinions. She was in a good mood and wouldn't resort to violence. However, upon returning home, she found a gang of thugs vandalizing her father's photo studio. It turned out he owed them money for a long time. Seeing the small amount borrowed but the high interest, Jae-yi became furious. She immediately went to confront their boss, Sun Pil, who had recently taken office and was unaware of the situation. However, he calmly handled the matter. She accused him of running an illegal agency and engaging in usury. He immediately sued her for intimidation and loan default. Both were familiar with the law, neither willing to back down. Everything would have been peaceful if Sun Pil hadn't touched upon Jae-yi's painful experience of being fired. As a result, she punched him in the mouth and was immediately detained by the police for 24 hours. Sun Pil, however, wouldn't let the matter rest. He scolded the thugs, saying they were all poor and yet they were doing such wicked things. He warned them that now that they were under his wing, they didn't need to do such heartless things anymore. The next day, he went to the police station to find Jae-yi and offer her a job as a manager at his law office. Jae-yi was unemployed, so she agreed. Surprisingly, she was released a day early, even though she hadn't paid bail. While drinking with her father, she learned that he had asked Moon Suk to help her. Moon Suk had sent Yeon Hee, the person Jae-yi hated most, to bail her out, so she couldn't be happy. Despite her bad mood, she still had to go to Sun Pil's office the next day to work and pay off her father's debts. Sang Pil was quite generous to his new hire. He took her on her first mission, robbing a client, a prisoner, about to be sentenced. Sang Pil showed Jae-yi the case file. Only then did she realize that this prisoner was the convicted murderer of the mayor. Why would Sang Pil want to reopen the case and argue his case in court? He'd also be stealing the client from the best lawyer in Kaesong. Was that even a good idea? The prisoner stepped out. Unexpectedly, it was Hung Man, whom San Pil had bitten years ago. The bite mark on his hand was still there. San Pil tried to persuade Hung Man to change his defense lawyer. He wanted Hung Man to be released from prison, but his current lawyer was Go-hun, the best lawyer in Kaesong, and there was no reason for him to change. Go-hun was on the same side as Oh-ju, the man who killed Sang Pil's mother. Oh-ju was also the superior of Boss Choi, whose tax-evading accountant Sang Pil had stolen. They both worked for Moon Suk. Clearly, the mayor's murder case was not simple. Jae-yi couldn't bear to look at Sang Pil, so she wanted to leave immediately. In the car, she asked him why he kept getting involved in this case, wondering if he wanted to overthrow someone, but he didn't want her to know too much, so he bought her some food. Then he made up an excuse, saying that Hung Man was well known in Kaesong, so if they could save him, a new lawyer like Sang Pil would enhance his reputation and gain more clients. As an upright female lawyer, Jae-yi was extremely annoyed by this. She returned the half-eaten sandwich to him and left. The mayor had just been murdered, so Moon Suk wanted Oh-ju to take over the position. He was overjoyed and knelt down to thank her. He said that no matter what happened, he would be loyal to her. Indeed, power can make people utterly despicable. Unexpectedly, Moon Suk seemed very close to Jae-yi. When she had free time, she even took Jae-yi shopping with her. Kaesong was where Jae-yi grew up, so she had been in contact contact with Moon-suk from an early age. From then on, Jae admired her. Because she idolized her, Jae became a lawyer so she could enforce the law like her. While the two were chatting happily, Moon-suk's secretary, Soon-ja, arrived. Soon-ja held a grudge against Jae because years ago, the teacher had given her child a low grade, so she stormed into the classroom wanting to hit the teacher. Jae was also present. Unable to restrain herself, she spoke up to defend the teacher, humiliating Soon-ja, and thus, they became enemies. Jae was upset, but upon returning to the office and meeting some humorous colleagues, she cheered up somewhat. Sang-pil took Jae to photograph the scene where the mayor was murdered. Suddenly, another prosecutor in charge of the case arrived and chased them away. Jae's enemy, prosecutor Yeon-hee, was also present. Yeon-hee even mocked Jae, calling her incompetent and useless, saying she had been fired. Yeon-hee told Sang-pil that if he wanted a manager, she could introduce him to someone better, so Jae wouldn't have to bother. Sang-pil refuted and defended Jae. Since he had chosen this person, the organization had to be more special than usual. That organization wasn't something an ordinary prosecutor could figure out. After saying this, he left. Unable to investigate the crime scene, Sang-pil went to lawyer Go-hun and openly stole his client. Go-hun simply told Sang-pil to withdraw from the case and left. This showed that Go-hun only considered Sang-pil a small lawyer trying to make a living in this area. Unexpectedly, he had his subordinates use a drone to record Go-hun's entire conversation with Oh-ju. As Sang-pil predicted, Daeyeon wasn't the real culprit. They promised to exonerate him so he would willingly remain silent and become a suspect. His trial had entered its preliminary stage. A series of unfavorable evidence pointed towards Daeyeon, but his trusted lawyer chose to remain silent and offer no defense. Daeyeon was extremely worried, yet after the trial, the lawyer was blamed by Moon-suk, not because she was on the right side, but because the lawyer was too obvious, not offering a single defense, giving the police an excuse to replace him. Convicting him would then be very complicated, so Go-hun bowed his head and apologized. This shows that outwardly she is just a regional judge, but inwardly she holds significant political power, manipulating everything from behind the scenes. At this time, Sang-pil approached Hungman, showing him the video of Go-hun's conversation. Knowing he was taking the blame and wouldn't be saved, the old man was extremely worried, but he also understood that this young lawyer's insistence on helping him surely had a larger agenda, so he refused. At this point, Jae began to share Sang-pil's opinion that Hungman wasn't the real culprit, but no matter how she thought about it, she couldn't find any suspicious points. The more she thought, the more vague memories came to mind, and she kept thinking about her mother. That fateful day, it was raining heavily. Jae wanted to buy a trumpet for her performance the next day, but her mother wouldn't let her. She told Jae to stay home while she went alone, but an hour later, and then again, her mother disappeared without a trace. To this day, her mother still hasn't returned. What exactly happened to her? In prison, the old policeman's life wasn't good. Fellow inmates were constantly plotting to kill him. The next day, Sang-pil came to see him again. This time, Hungman, having lost all patience with Sang-pil, angrily demanded to know what he wanted from him. Sang-pil no longer wanted to hide and slowly revealed that he was the boy Sang-pil had deceived years ago. After learning Sang-pil's identity, Hungman involuntarily trembled and recoiled. He also stated that his purpose in wanting to get Sang-pil out of prison was to take revenge himself. He couldn't let his enemy die at the hands of another. Hungman faced a choice between a lifetime in prison, possibly even being slandered, and the freedom to see his seriously ill wife before facing revenge. He chose the latter. He agreed to switch lawyers to Sang-pil. Yet after achieving the first step of his plan, Sang-pil drank and cried in the rain. He hated evil, hated all those who abused power, hated the thugs who killed without blinking an eye, and now he was gradually following that path. If Uncle Dae hadn't brought an umbrella to take him home, Sang-pil would probably have sat in the rain all night. After careful consideration, Sang-pil refused Uncle Dae's help. He would use the law to punish the villains, just as he had punished his mother. The third trial took place, but Sang-pil couldn't find Jae. A few minutes earlier, she had been kidnapped by Boss Choi. They thought she was important to Sang-pil. Standing outside the courthouse, Sang-pil anxiously called her, but a male voice answered. Boss Choi told Sang-pil to leave the courtroom quickly to save his girlfriend, but Sang-pil calmly said she wasn't his girlfriend, so there was no need to save her. Boss Choi looked at Jae, expecting her to be heartbroken, but instead, he felt nauseated. She was angry that he thought she was Sang-pil's girlfriend. However, not long after, Sang-pil called back, warning Boss Choi not to touch a single hair on Jae's head if he didn't want to die. Sang-pil would be there soon. Before leaving, he instructed his subordinates to create chaos to delay the trial for a few hours. While his subordinates caused a disturbance in the courtroom, Sang-pil wasn't idle either. He single-handedly fought off a group of thugs who kept charging at him as if they didn't feel any pain. Sang-pil took them all down. At the last minute, just as Sang-pil was about to untie Jae, Boss Choi smashed a bottle over over his head. Luckily, Jae-yi had thrown a drunken bludgeon at him, giving Sun-pil time to counterattack and take him down. The two quickly left the place and returned to the courthouse as fast as possible. In the car, Jae-yi noticed Sun-pil's wound and awkwardly helped him stop the bleeding. This was the first time she had shown him such concern, and he was truly happy. In truth, he had been interested in her for a long time. He had attended every one of her trials to cheer her on. He had even ordered his subordinates to demand money from her father to pressure her into working for him. He simply wanted to be by Jae-yi's side. The real reason was that years ago, the woman who held back the police officer, allowing Sun-pil to escape, was Jae-yi's mother. They were connected, and Sun-pil had discovered that the mastermind behind it all was Moon-suk. Therefore, in this battle, the two had to do their best to seek justice for themselves and their families who had been harmed. His subordinates even prepared a fire extinguisher to create a dramatic moment for their boss's appearance. From the white smoke, Sun-pil and Jae-yi officially returned to the game. The trial had just begun, and Sun-pil didn't rush to defend himself. Instead, he attacked the judge next to Moon-suk, calling him morally corrupt. Then, Sun-pil presented a video he had secretly filmed of a girl's skirt as evidence. Although this was unrelated to the trial, a member of the jury with poor morals would inevitably be disqualified. Moon-suk agreed to remove her people from the judge's seat after today. Yeon-hee, whom Moon-suk had groomed, was no pushover either. She accused the troublemakers of being employees of Sang-pil's law office. She accused him of inciting others to disrupt court proceedings. As a result, Sang-pil was handcuffed and taken away. But this made him happy, because being imprisoned meant he would have more time to see Hyungman. He and his subordinates were incredibly cheerful in prison. At mealtime, he went to meet the regional finance director. The director had been arrested to avoid the risk of being reported in the press. After a period of peace, he would go out and enjoy himself again. The regional intelligence network depended on him, which is why Sang-pil had to go and get acquainted with him. But he paid no attention to this inconsiderate man. Because of his suspicious nature and unwillingness to let anyone pry information from his experience, he left. Sang-pil didn't try to stop him. If plan A failed, he would have another plan ready. In another scene, Oh-ju, upon learning that his subordinates couldn't deal with Sang-pil, was extremely disappointed and stabbed Boss Choi in the thigh. Oh-ju warned that if Boss Choi failed again, the knife would be plunged into his heart next time. Immediately afterward, he received an anonymous package. Inside were images of his past crimes along with a warning stone. Clearly, someone knew he was about to become mayor and wanted to challenge him. At the same time, Jae-yi visited Sang-pil in prison. Through the glass door, Sang-pil could clearly see his feelings for her. Sang-pil greatly admired honest lawyers like Jae-yi. She's like his mother. She's willing to face anything for justice. And it's not just a recent crush, he's had it for a long time. On her graduation day, he secretly had someone deliver flowers to her. Initially, it was because her mother saved his life, but gradually, that gratitude turned into affection for Jae-yi, a strong and resilient girl. Returning to the present, Sang-pil confidently handed the entire case over to Jae-yi to handle. She could do whatever she wanted. This encouragement lifted Jae-yi's spirits. She went to the hospital to find Hyungman's wife and coincidentally met Oh-ju leaving. Her father had said that Hyungman loved his wife very much, willing to stay by her side and care for her sick wife without complaint. Even if he had been a bad person before, he wouldn't have committed murder. When Hyungman's wife learned that Jae-yi was defending her husband, she desperately begged for his help. She believed her husband was innocent. Jae-yi felt great sympathy for the unfortunate, and the more she sympathized, the more she didn't know how to comfort them. At that moment, Sang-pil approached the finance director again and said that he had sued himself to go to prison and save his life. But it seemed this move was a bit wrong, because there were no shortage of enemies of his in prison. He might even die sooner. This statement left the director speechless with fear. Sang-pil's prediction was correct. Soon after, a group of people ganged up on the director, making Sang-pil extremely happy. He immediately sent his men to rescue him. After being rescued, the director compromised and revealed what he knew. Oh-ju had a dream of reforming the city. He wanted to build a place called Logan City, but the mayor opposed it. So he ordered his henchmen to kill people and then tried to frame Hyungman. Sang-pil only needed this information to devise a new direction for his case. Jae-yi also approached Hyungman and mentioned his frail wife, who was waiting for his release from prison. She warned him that if he didn't cooperate, he wouldn't get to see her one last time. So he placed all his trust in Jae-yi. He told her that he was with the internet cafe owner on the day the mayor was murdered, which he claimed was his alibi. Without hesitation, Jae-yi went to the internet cafe to confront the owner. However, he refused to cooperate. Because Hyungman had previously abused his power and oppressed him, he didn't care if Hyungman was wrongly accused. Seeing Jae-yi's persistence, he even forcefully pushed her out. But she didn't give up. A short while later, Jae-yi brought Hyungman's sick wife into the internet cafe Tae to gain the owner's sympathy. The wife sincerely apologized on her husband's behalf and earnestly begged the owner to save him. The owner felt a little guilty for being a witness, but failing to save Hung Man. When Hung Man's wife knelt down, the owner's heart softened and he agreed to be a witness. After gathering enough crucial clues, the day arrived when Sang Pil and his gang were released on bail. However, just as they stepped out into the world of freedom, they narrowly avoided being hit by a car. Jae specifically came to pick them up. Soon, the final trial took place. Oh-ju personally attended to witness the outcome. In court, Sang Pil presented evidence proving that Hung Man was not present at the crime scene, but prosecutor Yeon Hee repeatedly refuted this, claiming Sang Pil threatened or bribed the witness. Her actions tarnished the lawyer's reputation, forcing Moon Suk to adjourn the trial to verify the authenticity of the photograph. Hearing this, Oh-ju left the trial, finding it too boring. He was certain the police officer would take his place. But little did he know that Sang Pil's gang member, disguised as a janitor, had run over his assistant. In just a few short seconds, a tracking chip had been attached to the man's clothing. After the trial ended, Sang Pil and Jae simply followed the tracking device to find where Assistant Oh had stopped. Sang Pil's men, hidden high above, were filming his actions live with cameras. He wanted to find an intermediary to help him cross the border illegally. So, as soon as Assistant Oh left, Sang Pil and his men, armed with batons, went looking for the intermediary. He had his men hang the man upside down from the balcony and force him to confess everything he had just told Assistant Oh. The man confessed that Oh-ju wanted him to bring someone to China that day, but they only showed him a photo, not specific information. Sang Pil looked at the photo thoughtfully. Suddenly, a man identical to the one in the photo appeared downstairs. The man, startled, immediately ran away. Sang quickly chased after the suspect. Seeing this, Jae also drove after them. They ran from the pedestrian underpass to the train tracks, neither giving up. The two men fought fiercely. Just as Sang Pil managed to grab the suspect by the neck and force him to confess to murdering the mayor, a high-speed train sped towards them, forcing Sang Pil to release his grip and step aside. The train sped along for a long time, but it left Sang Pil speechless as the suspect held a knife to Jae's neck. This had pushed Sang Pil to his limit. The lights flickered for a few seconds, then Sang Pil appeared right in front of him, clutching the sharp knife. He then punched the suspect repeatedly like an uncontrolled beast. If Jae hadn't intervened, the man would have likely lost his life. At this point, he was forced to admit that Oh-ju had ordered him to kill the man. But he was also forced to keep the secret, so he had no choice but to jump onto the tracks to prevent his loved ones from being murdered. No matter how strong Jae was, she was still just a girl. Faced with this situation, her whole body went limp, and she fainted from panic. Therefore, Sang Pil had to take her to the hospital. After a few hours, she finally calmed down, but the situation didn't allow them any rest. As soon as Jae woke up, the prosecutor arrived and took both of them to the station for questioning regarding the man who jumped onto the railway tracks. Clearly, this man was one of Moon Suk's men. The prosecutor repeatedly asked if Sang Pil had pushed the victim onto the tracks. Hearing this, Jae was very annoyed. There was no arrest warrant, so they didn't need to be there. As soon as Jae left the interrogation room, she encountered Yeon Hee. Yeon Hee asked about the victim's phone, as the police investigation hadn't found it at the scene. Later, Jae came face to face with Oh-ju. Jae didn't want to get involved with him, but Sang Pil ignored her warnings and approached him to talk. Jae didn't know how hard Sang Pil had to remain calm when standing before the man who murdered his mother. Oh-ju said Sang Pil looked familiar. He also said he was from this area, but didn't reveal his identity. Seeing Sang Pil's hateful eyes, Jae felt a sense of unease. That evening, Sang Pil drove Jae home and even invited her father in for tea. Seizing the opportunity, he readily agreed. Jae's father inquired about Sang Pil's parents' health, which caused him a pang of sadness. He said he lost his mother at a young age, but was incredibly proud to have a mother who was an upright and honest lawyer. This resonated with Jae, evoking an indescribable feeling of empathy. She also began to see Sang Pil in a different light after hearing him praise his mother. After returning to the office, Sang Pil gave the phone to Chief Tae, telling him to unlock it. It turned out he had actually stolen the suspect's phone. However, Chief Tae only knew how to fight. He didn't know how to pick locks, so they went to the morgue to borrow the suspect's fingerprints to unlock his phone. That night, Jae couldn't sleep, so she went to find Sang Pil to discuss the case. Unexpectedly, she overheard his conversation with Uncle Dae. Moon Suk, whom she respected, was preparing to make the despicable Oh-ju the mayor of this area. The door creaked open. Seeing Jae arrive, Uncle Dae left after a few questions. Jae desperately wanted to know the truth behind it all, but Sang Pil thought it wasn't the right time yet. While sitting in the office, Jae noticed a strange phone in Sang Pil's hand. She couldn't help but remember Yeon Hee demanding the victim's phone that morning. Meanwhile, a fishmonger, knowing Oh-ju and Hung Man's friendship, came to say that on the day the mayor was murdered, he saw someone nearby. This person was definitely not Hungman, but someone else, because this person didn't limp like Hungman. The fishmonger thought Oju would save his friend, so he wanted some money. But unexpectedly, he kicked the fishmonger, sending him tumbling down a high floor to silence him. Oju's thuggish demeanor made Moon-suk begin to dislike him. But even when Moon-suk scolded him, Oju still smiled and said he had given everyone there a suitcase full of fish, because the market he managed was surely overflowing with money. Oju personally helped Moon-suk load the money into the safe. This amount was enough for her to live comfortably for the rest of her life. But for these people, greed is insatiable. Oju still harbored dreams of the Logan City project, bringing him even more money. But in Moon-suk's eyes, this dream was just a childish fantasy. Her face clearly showed contempt. A few days later, a closed-door meeting between the judges and lawyers took place. Moon-suk brazenly rejected the evidence Sang-pil provided. She even declared the video to be fake. Since everyone present was in cahoots, Sang-pil knew arguing would be pointless, so he only promised that he would have evidence at the next trial to silence them, and quietly left. After spending some time with her, Sang-pil realized that Yeon-hee was competitive but also fought for what was right, only being deceived by Moon-suk. That's why he told her that Oju was the mayor's killer. He also revealed that Oju was about to become the new mayor thanks to Moon-suk's support. Knowing she wouldn't believe him, Sang-pil thought this psychological attack would be enough. As he was leaving, Sang-pil wanted to call Jae to ask if she was still at the office, but he was shocked to learn she had gone to the prison to visit Hungman. When Sang-pil arrived, Hyungman was recounting how terrible Moon-suk was, but Sang-pil quickly interrupted him. He didn't know Jae was unaware of the truth. Sang-pil pulled her outside, facing Jae's suspicious gaze. He had to shatter her illusions about Moon-suk. She wasn't a kind and talented judge at all, but a real devil. Before Jae could even believe it, an investigator approached and greeted her. It turned out he was the police officer who had been investigating her mother's disappearance years ago. She gave him her business card. He was a very dedicated officer who was still investigating the case. After talking, the two went for a walk together. Jae looked seriously into Sang-pil's eyes and said that she considered Moon-suk like her own mother, so if he wanted her to think badly of her just because of some misunderstanding or conflict on his part, he should have more convincing evidence. On the other hand, the police found the fishmonger's body. The investigator wanted to investigate further, but the other police officers saw him as just a poor man and concluded that the victim had acted rashly. Further investigation would only waste money and effort. Meanwhile, Oju remembered the female lawyer he had killed years ago. He also realized that Sang-pil was the child who swallowed the chip, so Hungman had tricked him. He hadn't dealt with the boy yet, allowing him to grow up and seek revenge. The conflict over Moon-suk kept them awake all night. How could he convince her that he was telling the truth? The next morning, Sang-pil and Chief Tae wanted to investigate the strange number on the phone of the man who had questioned them on the line, but Jae stopped them. She wanted to go with them too. Sang-pil didn't want her to go, fearing she might be in danger, but she was determined, so no one could stop her. They arrived at the location and met the owner of the phone number. He was the middleman who hired a hitman to kill Oju. Seeing him get into his car and try to leave, Sang-pil's men rushed forward and banged on the car door to stop him. Frightened, he sped away, and Sang-pil chased after him closely. They weaved through all kinds of narrow alleyways. Sang-pil's car, unfortunately, went against the traffic and crashed into another car, but he didn't stop, instead accelerating and continuing the chase. When they entered a one-way alley, Oju's car collided with a truck going in the opposite direction. Sang-pil still pressed the gas pedal, cornering Oju's car and then accelerating to the maximum, forcing both cars to reverse, making Oju swerve to save his life. Meanwhile, a memorial service was being held for the great local judge, Moon-suk's father. After her moving and eloquent speech, Oju boldly took the microphone and called for support, enraging Moon-suk, but she couldn't physically attack him in front of the crowd. Just when it seemed the matter was settled, Sang-pil triumphantly entered, accompanied by his intermediary. He ascended the platform and loudly declared to the people that this man was the broker who hired the assassin to kill the former mayor. The crowd began to murmur and whisper. Seeing the situation was escalating, Moon-suk and Oju retreated. Sang-pil, undeterred, followed them up. Jae tried to stop him, but his icy, sharp eyes intimidated her. Only someone consumed by hatred could possess such eyes. Above, Moon-suk was fiercely attacking Oju for daring to disrupt her father's ceremony. The tall, powerful man could only stand before her, his hands clasped in humiliation. After Moon-suk calmed down, he dared to say that Sang-pil was the son of the female lawyer who held the old male chip. Moon-suk was slightly startled. She let Oju leave first while she quietly thought about how to deal with the situation in the courtroom. Suddenly, Sang-pil appeared right behind her. When he confronted her, she denied it. Only after confirming there was no recording device did she gradually reveal her true nature. All of this was overheard by Jae. The woman she considered her mother had killed someone else's mother. Moon-suk left, but ran into Jae. She didn't want to explain much. This was a shock to Jae. She couldn't be happy all day. She remembered how years ago she had desperately searched everywhere for her mother with a note, and Moon-suk had gently come to hug her and comfort her, promising to find her mother. A child deprived of a mother's warmth had come to trust, respect, and adore this woman. However, Jae's father now mistakenly believes Sun-pil to be uneducated and wicked. He intends to sell the photography studio to pay off Sun-pil's debts. He doesn't want his daughter to work for someone like that anymore. Jae doesn't know how to broach the subject. She fears her father will be utterly disappointed in Moon-suk, just like she was, so she only holds his hand to comfort him and calm his anger. The next day, Jae still carries a glimmer of hope as she goes to see Moon-suk. She wants to know if she has any troubles. Moon-suk agrees to talk with Jae. This woman begins with hypocritical arguments, just like the mask of righteousness she wears. She asks Jae if she thinks using the law to punish others is a prerogative of judges. To her, it's a punishment because the number of people who hate her increases with the number of people she judges. Then she says Sun-pil is one of those enemies, which is why he falsely accused her. Her sadness truly makes Jae waver. Moon-suk also gave her a business card from another detective agency to get a job with. Meanwhile, Sun-pil was walking down the street when he saw a newspaper praising Oh-ju's simple and friendly nature. He wasn't just a scoundrel, but also a very good marketer. He had someone film him eating at a restaurant and was attracting many supporters. Just as they were painting a bright future ahead, Sun-pil burst through the door, shattering their illusions. Sun-pil showed the assassin's phone, but the assassin calmly smiled, convinced it was just an empty phone, and ordered his henchmen to throw it away. Jae was truly convinced by Moon-suk's words. When Sun-pil drove up to greet her, she deliberately ignored him and walked away. But Sang-pil stopped her and told her about the new details of the case. Now she had two conflicting thoughts. Was he determined to win the case for revenge, or was it truly for the benefit of the community? The next court session for the mayor's murder case quickly arrived. Jae still chose to accompany Sang-pil to the courtroom to fight. But unexpectedly, the hitman's broker sat in the witness chair instead of the defendant. Hung-man worried that the broker might frame him, but Sang-pil's expression clearly showed he had prepared himself. Whatever happened, he would adapt accordingly. The broker had clearly been threatened or bribed, as he constantly objected to Sang-pil's incriminating questions. Some of Sang-pil's questions were even challenged by the prosecutor. Moon-suk also warned Sang-pil to ask seriously and not use harsh language, but Sang-pil didn't want to be serious. He didn't need the answers either. This confident demeanor was definitely a result of preparation. Sure enough, outside, Sang-pil's mother was brought in by his men. This was to show her the bad things he had done, making the broker afraid. He was afraid of disappointing his kind, mute mother. Sang-pil sensed this and had someone escort her out. Overwhelmed by guilt, he couldn't bear it any longer and blurted out Oh-ju's name. Moon-suk didn't expect to lose this game. As the judge presiding over the trial, she could have manipulated everything to her liking, but she forgot that there's one thing money can't control: human remorse. Oh-ju's name being called in court caused his approval rating to plummet. All his previous efforts to build his image were wasted. Yeon-hee didn't realize that all the evidence she believed was actually fake, so she started paying more attention to the information Sun-pil provided. He also told her that Oh-ju's secretary had fled abroad, and her investigation team had kept this a secret. This made her begin to suspect those on her side. As for Jae, she didn't know what the vague pieces of the past meant. What was the relationship between Sang-pil and Moon-suk? So she decided to investigate it herself. First, she went to find Hyungman and confirmed that Moon-suk was the one behind Oh-ju. Then she went to the old bookstore and asked the owner if he knew of any shocking events that had happened there in the past. He said there was once a talented female lawyer who, after some unfortunate incident, did something reckless. Her young son also disappeared. Afterward, Jae returned to the office and questioned Chief Tae about Sang-pil's past. However, Chief Tae didn't reveal anything. Jae then turned to Sang-pil's subordinate. Being straightforward and honest, he confessed. One fine day, Sang-pil appeared wanting to reclaim the office because it had once belonged to him. He wanted to say something more, but Chief Tae stopped him in time. However, the more Sang-pil tried to hide it, the more his curiosity was piqued. She searched online for the female lawyer who had done something reckless, as the bookstore owner had mentioned. Jae realized that the day she died was also the day her mother disappeared. This was clearly not normal. If it really involved her mother, she absolutely had to investigate. Chief Tae, seeing the search history, felt that the truth was about to be revealed, so he immediately called Sang-pil. But Sang-pil couldn't answer because he was talking to Jae's father. Due to a misunderstanding, the father sternly said he didn't want Sang-pil near or forcing his son want to work with him anymore. Faced with this anger, Sang-pil didn't know how to explain, so he could only leave reluctantly. Meanwhile, Jae-yi went to the police station again to ask for more information from the investigators. After hearing her question about lawyer Choi, the father gave her a copy of the documents she had left behind. He also said he was sure there was something hidden in this matter. Because lawyer Choi loved her son, she certainly wouldn't abandon him. The more Jae-yi thought about lawyer Choi's son, the more she thought of Sang-pil. So she went to see his uncle. At this point, she didn't know they were uncle and nephew. She only thought Sang-pil was one of Uncle Dae's most capable subordinates, so she asked why he had left the city to return to Kisum. As a veteran of the underworld who had been through countless things, Uncle Dae knew one truth: the more you try to hide something, the further it gets. So he told Jae-yi that lawyer Choi was his sister and Sang-pil's biological mother. Sang-pil returned to Kisum to gamble everything, both for revenge and to eradicate evil. The truth came as a shock, and Jae-yi couldn't imagine how horrific the story behind it all was. Meanwhile, Sang-pil visited Hung-man in prison again, but this time, Hung-man refused to see him. This was because Oju had previously dealt a psychological blow to Hung-man's weak heart. Oju showed him a cleverly edited video framed to frame him. If Hung-man didn't obey, he would face life imprisonment for murdering the mayor. If he behaved well, he would be released from prison safely. Immediately after Oju left, Hung-man's wife called and said Oju had paid all her hospital bills. Threatened and indebted, Hung-man didn't dare meet Sang-pil. That night, Oju went to Sang-pil's office again, bringing up his mother's death. Oju spoke sarcastically, hinting at the pain Sang-pil had kept hidden in his heart. In a fit of anger, Sang-pil grabbed Oju by the collar, but seeing her face, Sang-pil let go. Sang-pil would let the law, which he always despised, punish him. That was also his mother's wish. As soon as he left Sang-pil's place, Oju went to Moon-suk's house to flatter her. He had been so arrogant and despicable just moments before, but now he was equally vile. That night, Sang-pil, with a heavy heart, went out to enjoy the sea breeze. When he returned to the office, Jae-yi was already waiting. Sang-pil was slightly surprised, but tried to hide his unease, telling her she didn't need to work overtime and should go home. Jae-yi was unusually calm. She went to the statue of the goddess of justice and gently turned it. A series of images of her from the past years appeared before her eyes. She asked why he was investigating her. On the day his mother died, her mother also disappeared. She said she deserved to know the truth, so he should tell her. Since she had investigated this far, Sang-pil couldn't hide it anymore. He told her everything. Whether she believed it or not was up to her. Looking at the images on the screen, it was clear they had been investigated for a long time, not something fabricated for her to discover. Jae-yi couldn't believe the truth. For so long, she had foolishly called the person involved in her mother's disappearance mother. She had even admired and revered Moon-suk like a saint. Her complex emotions made Jae-yi lose her composure. Sang-pil patiently followed and comforted her. It took a while before she calmed down. They sat by the beach, drinking and watching fireworks. Late at night, he even personally carried her back to the office. It was always like that. Whenever she was tired and overwhelmed, there was always a shoulder and arms ready to support her. Seeing the small girl before him, exhausted and devastated by the truth, was the reason he wanted to keep everything a secret from her. The next day, Jae-yi woke up feeling much better. Meanwhile, Uncle Dae had tucked Sang-pil into his chair, letting him sleep soundly. He was probably staying up to watch over her. He was afraid she would wake up in the middle of the night crying, and there would be no one to wipe away her tears. Even Chief Tae, seeing Sang-pil's listless eyes, was worried about his health. Prosecutor Yeon-hee, affected by Sang-pil's words, began to suspect her subordinate. She was working hard on this case for justice, not for money. Therefore, she feared that the justice she was defending was a terrifying mask of power. Yeon-hee was the daughter of the secretary who worked diligently for Moon-suk. Despite Oju's best efforts, his vote count was only second. The mayoral election was approaching, yet he still mockingly said that he wasn't worried because he had prosecutor Yeon-hee. Hearing her daughter's name uttered by Oju's filthy mouth, the secretary was furious, vowing that he shouldn't even think about having any intentions towards her daughter. Despite her wicked deeds, she was incredibly proud of her righteous and capable daughter. Therefore, she wouldn't allow anyone to tarnish her, not even herself. Sang-pil still hadn't told Jae-yi that her mother had clashed with Hung-man to save him. He had fled, so he didn't know if her mother was alright. Currently, Jae-yi was flipping through old photo albums, looking at every location her mother had photographed. She wondered why her mother would risk her life photographing such desolate places. Unexpectedly, Oju appeared nearby. He was campaigning. His expression was clearly malicious, but his words tried to portray himself as a highly educated and noble man worthy of being mayor, which Jae-yi couldn't bear to listen to anymore. She wished she could quickly have him thrown in jail. With mixed feelings, she strolled along the beach and encountered Sang-pil. He seemed to appear almost every time she needed him most. Jae-yi asked asked him how he knew her mother. For years, she had held on to the hope that her mother was still alive, so he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. But perhaps now it was impossible to hide it any longer. He said that her mother had saved him. Jae-yi then went to the prison to find Hung Man and told him she was the daughter of the woman who had held him captive all those years ago. She asked him what he had done to her mother. He trembled, repeatedly apologizing, but Jae-yi would never forgive such a wicked person. She sadly returned to her office and hugged Sang-pil. She felt he must be exhausted from carrying so many painful secrets for so many years. Two people sharing the same pain developed a deep empathy, creating a bond that brought them together. After confirming their feelings for each other, they felt more comfortable together each time they went out. They were strolling along the beach when Sang-pil received a call from Oh-ju. But on the other end of the line was Hung Man. It turned out Oh-ju had come to the jail again today to pressure Hung Man into confessing, but this time he decided not to compromise. Hung Man asked Sang-pil if he could clear his name. Sang-pil answered without hesitation that he would get Hung Man out safely. Hung Man looked Oh-ju straight in the face and told him to get out. Then Hung Man left, leaving Oh-ju furious but powerless. Just as he left, Sang-pil and Jae-yi arrived. The police informed them that Oh-ju had fabricated the crime scene video evidence with incredible skill. Earlier, Sang-pil's team also discovered a truck at the crime scene. It's highly likely that the truck's dashcam recorded something. They need to find this truck quickly before the next trial. The case is becoming increasingly difficult, so Sang-pil decided to hire someone for his office, the younger sister of the second boss. She fell head over heels for Sang-pil at first sight and immediately agreed to work for him. Meanwhile, Jae-yi's father, unaware of the situation, was still trying to support Oh-ju's campaign. Unable to bear it any longer, she told him the truth about Oh-ju being a bad person. However, her father seemed too busy to believe her and left immediately. Helpless, Jae-yi returned to her office. She remembered the truck Sang-pil mentioned. The day before, the investigator had also told a colleague about the fish vendor who was questioning himself by the beach. So, Sang-pil and Jae-yi went to find the investigator to ask about this. The case had to be closed. Thankfully, the investigator still had the address of the company that owned the car, so Jae-yi immediately went to find the owner to ask for the car's black box. At the same time, the next trial was about to begin. Both Sang-pil and Jae-yi were racing against time. The manager was uncooperative, but Jae-yi remembered that he had borrowed money from her and hadn't repaid it, so she threatened to call his wife. He had no choice but to hand over the cameras. But the workshop had many cars, so they had to find each one individually. In court, Sang-pil was trying his best to stall for time, but Moon-suk saw through his trick and urged him not to talk nonsense anymore. Sang-pil had no choice but to request that Oh-ju appear in court to give testimony because the defendant was accusing him. There were people watching the trial, so Moon-suk couldn't be biased. She decided to take a 10-minute break for the jury to convene. 10 minutes later, the trial resumed. Fortunately, this time Jae-yi successfully retrieved the video. The witness at this point was Prosecutor Jun, a subordinate of Prosecutor Yeon-hee. He was also on Oh-ju's side. All the evidence in the case was found by him. He claimed to have gone to the scene where the former mayor was murdered after receiving a call reporting the crime. But Sang-pil refuted this, presenting the black box video from the truck. After watching the video, Prosecutor Yeon-hee couldn't believe that her trusted subordinate was fabricating evidence at the scene. At this point, Prosecutor Yeon-hee had to personally announce that the prosecution was dropping all charges against Hung Man. As the judge, Moon-suk could only declare him innocent. After many months in prison, he was finally released. Upon his release, he immediately rushed to the hospital to visit his wife. Her condition had worsened, but she still tried to wait for her husband's visit. When they met, she urged him to do the right thing from now on to atone for his past crimes. He promised he would. Hearing these words, she finally passed away peacefully. That night, Hyung-man called a woman in Thailand. Unexpectedly, it was Jae-yi's mother. She was still alive. Hearing her daughter's name, she burst into tears. Because her subordinates fabricated evidence, all responsibility fell on Prosecutor Yeon-hee's shoulders. She faced the risk of having her license revoked. Faced with such turmoil, people are easily swayed. Sure enough, Prosecutor Yeon-hee sought help from Moon-suk. Knowing this, Moon-suk immediately pulled Yeon-hee to her side. She had Yeon-hee join a secret 7-person group, including Prosecutor Jun. With Moon-suk's backing, Oh-ju was promoted to mayor. That day, he held a large press conference to celebrate his new mayoral position. Sang-pil realized that the reason a meticulous person like Moon-suk would give the mayoral position to Oh-ju was because she wanted to manipulate the city through a scheme. The previous mayor was also her loyal dog, but he had his own opinions. But Oh-ju is different. He's practically a loyal dog, so Moon-suk will be easier to control. Right now, if they want to attack that group, they have to start with Hung Man, who has a long-standing relationship with Oh-ju. If they don't protect him now, Oh-ju might might kill him. He's currently submitting his resignation to his superiors. Before leaving, he secretly took a key from under the desk. At the same time, the TV is showing Oh-ju taking office as mayor. Hyungman is resentful and says he will personally drag Oh-ju back to the bottom of society where he rightfully belongs. Just as Sang-pil predicted, as soon as Hyungman left the police station and drove home, he was followed closely by Oh-ju's henchmen. They were planning some evil scheme, but Sang-pil's car blocked their way. At all costs, he had to protect Hyungman's life until he captured Oh-ju. As soon as they saw his face, they turned around and drove away in disgust. Because they blocked his way, Sang-pil and Jae lost track of Hyungman. Luckily, Sang-pil had already installed a GPS tracker on Hyungman's phone, so he immediately called home and instructed his subordinates to track his location. While driving, Hyungman reminisced about the past. He had spared Jae's mother's life, but he had used the lives of her husband and child to force her to leave Korea. He feared that if Oh-ju found out he hadn't handled things properly, he would lose his life. Now, after decades, that woman had returned to her homeland. Hyungman went to a suburban parking lot and used his key to unlock another car, taking out a black box. Inside were a gun, a few bullets, and a picture of the accident from years ago. A short while later, Sang-pil and Jae arrived. They couldn't see Hyungman from a distance. Hyungman was standing high above, observing them. He called Jae, saying the documents in the trunk were incredibly helpful in overthrowing Oh-ju. He then added that he owed her nothing. That night, at the restaurant, Hyungman confronted Oh-ju. He asked the owner to leave, then pulled a gun from his pocket and pointed it directly at Oh-ju's forehead. Their decades-long friendship was nothing more than a master-servant relationship of mutual exploitation. But Hyungman's mental fortitude was weak. He quickly lost control, allowing Oh-ju to take the initiative. Hyungman was hit on the head with a bottle and then brutally kicked. Afterward, Oh-ju's henchmen locked him in a car and took him to a secret building. Meanwhile, Sang-pil and Jae brought the trunk of documents back to the office, where everyone searched for evidence. After a long night immersed in documents, they finally found the evidence. Seo-sik, the chairman of the largest bank in the area, was the mastermind behind Oh-ju's large loan, and currently, he is also the one helping Oh-ju anonymously entrust the Ozu company to carry out the Logan City project. At this time, the 7 members of the group met again. Oh-ju happily announced that the person taking over the management of the Ozu Corporation would be banker Seo-sik. He smiled happily. At this point, Sang-pil had summarized the evidence from the police files that a company had gone bankrupt after only 1 month of establishment without a business registration license. At that time, this company had received a loan of 50 billion won from the bank. Of that, 10 billion won belonged to the people of Kisung. Significantly, this was just a shell company, but it had a connection to the Ozu Corporation. In other words, the company intentionally went bankrupt to help Oh-ju create a slush fund to steal money from the people. Therefore, they now needed to quickly take down Seo-sik to find the hiding place of Oh-ju's slush fund. Seo-sik, being the banker, also had some power. It would be very difficult for Sang-pil's group to overthrow him on their own. Therefore, they had to rely on another judge. He was an upright man, so Sang-pil felt very confident in trusting the case to him. The next day, Sang-pil personally went to the trial to find prosecutor Jung. Upon seeing Sang-pil, Jung was initially disdainful. In his eyes, Sang-pil had once been a lawless lawyer who disregarded the law. However, after seeing the case file Sang-pil presented, he was forced to seriously consider the matter. Jae went to the television station and waited for a tough female reporter who had previously asked Oh-ju if she had used any tactics when she appeared before the mayor. She was a reporter who would dig up information no matter what. She also had another nickname, Dog Reporter. As soon as she saw the female reporter, Jae approached her and stated her purpose. Moon-suk was reviewing newly opened bank accounts under false names when she noticed one account was missing. Seo-sik explained that the child had passed away a few days earlier. It turns out these villains used the names of poor orphans to open fake bank accounts, the purpose of which was to store the dirty money they obtained. Just as Oh-ju arrived at his new office, and before he could even enjoy his new life, he received news that the prosecution had launched an investigation into the bank. Evidence had emerged that the former shell company had defrauded the bank through loans. Chairman Seo-sik was arrested for his direct involvement in the case. Prosecutor Jung had arrived in Kaesong City and, along with investigators, questioned Seo-sik. Seo-sik refused to take responsibility and tried to shift the blame to his employees. Prosecutor Jung understood that these criminals feared nothing more than losing their own lives. Therefore, Prosecutor Jung used a psychological tactic against Seo-sik, suggesting that Oh-ju had abandoned him to save his own life. So he shouldn't bother protecting such an ungrateful person. He should take down the person who betrayed him with him. The Ozu case could not proceed because the person being investigated was under arrest. Moon-suk asked Oh-ju to redirect her investment to her father's mother's still operating charity fund. This would sever his connection with Seo-sik and also turn the money into a secret stash. This made him somewhat suspicious and hesitant, but he eventually agreed. Meanwhile, at the abandoned building, Hungman was being tortured by Boss Choi to extract information, but to no avail. No matter how much he was tortured, he wouldn't utter a word. When the secretary arrived, Moon-suk instructed her to find the name of the judge who had fired Jae. A massage parlor employee in the room overheard this. She then went to a corner to call Jae's mother, but the secretary overheard her. After Moon-suk managed to contact the judge, she also called Jae to meet her. Seeing that Jae knew the famous female judge, the judge no longer dared to be arrogant. He immediately apologized to her for his previous actions. Moon-suk announced the end of Jae's suspension, but Jae no longer seemed happy or grateful as before. With a cold expression, Jae said that if she were allowed to resume her profession, she would expose all of Moon-suk's crimes. Moon-suk could only laugh to hide her anger. Jae returned to clean up the shop with her father. From a distance, a woman watched them, tears streaming down her face. It was Jae's biological mother. She feared her sudden appearance would disrupt their lives, but for decades she had suppressed her longing, and now she could no longer bear it. Sang-pil had come to Moon-suk. He mocked her, rendering her speechless. She ran into the office and pulled out a photo of herself with Sang-pil's mother. Years ago, the two were close friends, but Sang-pil's mother had investigated and found evidence of Moon-suk's crimes. Sang-pil's mother advised Moon-suk to turn herself in, offering to act as her lawyer and try to help her. However, Moon-suk threatened her with her son. Meanwhile, Oh-ju drove to the building where Hung-man was being held. Sang-pil's men, who had been secretly monitoring everything, called him to inform him. Oh-ju questioned Hung-man, asking if he was the one who delivered the bank documents to Sang-pil's group. Hung-man laughed and admitted it. Enraged, Oh-ju ordered his men killed to cover his tracks. He then had his men set fire to the car containing Hung-man's documents to destroy everything. Sang-pil arrived just in time. He and Chief Tae rushed into the warehouse to fight Oh-ju's men and rescue Hung-man. However, after they untied Hung-man, he was struck hard on the head. Chief Tae then helped him away. Sang-pil didn't stay long before he finished dealing with everything. He then ran after Hung-man to help him, but because he had just suffered a fatal blow to the head, he knew he couldn't live much longer. In his final moments, he expressed remorse for his actions. He thanked Sang-pil for helping him clear his name. At the same time, Hyungman hoped Sang-pil would never forgive him for what he had done. After saying this, he closed his eyes and passed away forever. Meanwhile, Oh-ju was holding a press conference denouncing construction companies for cutting corners on materials and building large but shoddy projects. He also accused the union representative of accepting bribes and corruption for personal gain. Then, he exploited the people's grief over losing their homes and land to announce his grand project called Logan City. Moon-suk watched from home and was very pleased. Oh-ju also attended Hung-man's funeral. Before leaving, Oh-ju tried to provoke Sang-pil about his deceased mother, but she failed because Sang-pil remained calm. Jae's mother also quietly attended the funeral. The two accidentally bumped into each other, causing the mother to tremble and momentarily unsure what to do. Jae, still not recognizing her mother, repeatedly apologized. With tears welling up in her eyes, Jae's mother turned to leave, but inadvertently dropped her glasses near Jae. Actually, before Hung-man's death, he had revealed to Sang-pil that Jae's mother was still alive. Therefore, Sang-pil had already sent his subordinates to search for her whereabouts. Meanwhile, he stayed by her side, drinking with her and comforting her. Later, he carried her for a walk along the picturesque beach. Meanwhile, Jae's father was taken to Moon-suk's house. Initially, she wanted him to design the cover for her upcoming book, but then she said she wanted him to bring his daughter back to Seoul because she had reinstated her as his daughter's lawyer. It turned out that was her real purpose. She wanted Jae to leave. Moon-suk knew that Jae's father was her biggest weakness, so she would probably listen to him. As soon as he got home, he saw Sang-pil carrying his daughter back to the house. He put on a stern face and called her inside. He asked if she had been reinstated, and if so, to return to Seoul to work. Jae couldn't hold back any longer and told her father that Moon-suk had masterminded her mother's disappearance years ago. He wouldn't allow her to be ungrateful to her benefactor. Believing she had been brainwashed by Sang-pil, he slapped his daughter and stormed into his room. Having been kicked out of the house by her father, Jae packed her suitcase and stayed with Sang-pil for a while. Meanwhile, Oh-ju visited Seo-sik in prison. When they reunited, Seo-sik was happy, thinking he was about to be saved. But Oh-ju threatened him with a video of his daughter, demanding he confess to all the crimes if he wanted to live. Just as Prosecutor Jung had said, he had been abandoned because his daughter had admitted that she was the mastermind behind everything and that no one else was manipulating things. The prosecutor's office also sent a notice requesting Prosecutor Jung to stop investigating the case. At this time, the entire law office went out for a celebratory meal to mark Jae's reinstatement. Now their office had 2 lawyers. Sung Pil fed Jae meat with his chopsticks. Their overly affectionate display caused everyone who had been laughing and chatting to fall silent. To avoid attention, Sung Pil promoted Cheese to manager, making her so happy that she tried to feed him some meat, but Jae stopped her. Department head Tae also asked why Jae stayed at Sung Pil's office yesterday. He explained that her family had encountered some problems, so she would be staying with him for a while. Cheese felt uncomfortable and suggested that Jae come live with her. After the meal, the two went to see Prosecutor Jung. He said the prosecutor's office had forced him to stop investigating the authorization and bank case, so they had to quickly make a new plan. At this time, Uncle Dae accidentally met Jae's mother. He recognized her at first sight. He worried that if Oh-ju knew she was still alive, she would be in danger. But Jae's mother, having been lonely for so many years, could no longer bear living like that, so she had to return to Korea and would not leave again. As Uncle Dae was driving back, he was stopped by Big Boss Choi, who used to bow down to him, but now dared to brazenly block his car. Big Boss Choi said Oh-ju wanted to see Uncle Dae, so he should follow them. Meanwhile, Jae's mother took a risk and applied for a massage position at Moonsuk. But before that, she had to go through the secretary's selection process. The two previous applicants both had national-level massage certifications, but only Jae's mother answered the secretary's questions correctly. When she started working, she acted as if she didn't see or hear anything. Because she kept her secret, she was hired. The secretary led her to Moonsuk to begin massaging. Serving her enemy prevented her from getting married, but she had to endure it all for the sake of avenging her daughter and family. Jae is currently happily in love with Sung Pil. While she was working, he took her away to change her appearance, then took her to a flower shop to buy a bouquet. Afterward, he led her to a place he had prepared beforehand and unexpectedly produced a cake to celebrate her mother's birthday. This moved her to tears. At this moment, she felt she had chosen the right person. Jae gave Sung Pil a kiss on the forehead to thank him. In the evening, they stood silently, gazing at the city. At this time, Uncle Dae arrived to meet Oh-ju. He smiled and cheerfully welcomed his friend Kai Sung, who had just returned from Seoul. Having been involved in the underworld for many years, the two couldn't be said to be strangers. They were both top-ranking gang leaders, but being in Oh-ju's territory, he had the upper hand. He demanded that Uncle Dae take Sung Pil back to Seoul and stop ruining his career. However, Uncle Dae refused to compromise. Seeing this, Oh-ju signaled his henchmen. In a flash, they rushed forward and injected Uncle Dae with a tranquilizer, giving his men no time to react. Uncle Dae gradually lost consciousness and fainted. The next morning, he was taken to the rooftop of a building. Boss Choi called and threatened Sung Pil, demanding he come immediately or his uncle would die. Jae sensed the danger and wanted to go with him, but he instructed his subordinates to watch her. He drove alone to rescue his uncle. When he arrived, his uncle was hanging precariously. He fought desperately against Oh-ju's henchmen. Suddenly, the rope pulling Uncle Dae was cut. Sang Pil desperately grabbed the rope, dragging him to the wall. He used all his strength to pull his uncle up. When he finally grasped his uncle's hand, his uncle told him not to try to save him anymore, or both of them would die. His final words were a warning to his grandson not to seek revenge, to avoid going down the wrong path, and to live a good life. Then, Uncle Dae pulled his hand away from his grandson's and fell to the ground. Even more outrageous was that Oh-ju had called the police to the scene. It turned out that their men had left earlier to frame Sang Pil for Uncle Dae's murder. Jae, at home, was constantly worried and anxious. After watching the news on TV, she couldn't stand still. When Oh-ju achieved his plan, he shrugged his shoulders and smiled triumphantly. However, strangely, after Moonsuk saw the news, her expression was extremely displeased. She immediately summoned Oh-ju. Unexpectedly, having risen to the position of mayor, he had become arrogant and looked down on everyone else. Instead of rushing to Moonsuk's summons, he calmly delegated tasks to his subordinates before meeting her. Meanwhile, the police and prosecutors arrived at Sang Pil's law office to conduct a search. Seeing so many familiar faces handling the case made Jae uncomfortable, so she left. She went to visit Sang Pil. He emerged looking frail, which deeply saddened her. Witnessing the death of his only remaining relative, he still couldn't accept it. He was so distraught that he couldn't muster the strength to do anything. Jae hugged Sang Pil tightly, comforting him and offering him support. She told him to let her handle everything. At the police station, Sang Pil's men were being questioned. Jae entered as a lawyer, saying that the police shouldn't interrogate innocent people like this. The police officer didn't argue with the lawyer and remained silent, allowing Jae to take the men away. Back at the office, everyone had dinner together, comforting each other, but the atmosphere remained incredibly heavy. One of the subordinates had left, fearing repercussions, making everyone even more upset. It wasn't until evening that Oh-ju came to see Moonsuk. He was no longer timid or obedient to her. He spoke to her as an equal, even arrogantly. Unexpectedly, he even dared to snatch the wine from from her. After he and Jute got drunk, he went berserk, grabbing the bottle and gulping it down in one go. These two were equally insane and wicked, knowing each other's secrets, so if the ship capsized, both would lose their lives, because their feet were chained together by a single chain of guilt. The next day, Jae personally went to Moon Suk to beg her to release Sang Pil from prison on the day of Uncle Dae's funeral. She laughed and reminded Jae that she absolutely had to win the upcoming trial and ensure Sang Pil was acquitted. Uncle Dae's funeral was held quickly, and all the brothers who had been kind to him attended. Among them was In Nam, a very close friend of Uncle Dae. In Nam mistakenly believed Sang Pil was the real culprit behind Uncle Dae's death. Seeing Sang Pil appear, In Nam was about to attack him, but the police stopped him in time. Sang Pil couldn't care less about anything else. Inside, kneeling before Uncle Dae's memorial tablet, Sang Pil cried loudly like a child in pain. The uncle who had protected him for so many years had truly left him forever. From now on, he had no relatives left. As the police took him away, he didn't forget to tell Chief Tae to protect Jae well. Now, she was the most important person to him. The investigator pulled Sang Pil aside and asked him if he was really the son of lawyer Choi Nam-soo. Receiving an answer that seemed to have been anticipated, the investigator wasn't too surprised. After Sang Pil returned to the detention center, he had to meet Oh-ju again. He constantly taunted Sang Pil about his pain and provoked him to take revenge. But then, Oh-ju told him to just accept his fate in prison. But as Oh-ju was about to leave, Sang Pil laughed and said that if Moon Suk wanted him acquitted, it would be difficult for Oh-ju to harm him. This situation was giving Oh-ju a huge headache. He wanted to deal with Sang Pil, but couldn't go against Moon Suk's wishes. Today, while investigating the crime scene, Jae narrowly avoided being hit on the head by two falling iron bars. Luckily, Chief Tae pulled her away in time. Afterwards, she visited Sang Pil in prison. They discussed the case. Jae said that all the evidence currently pointed to Sang Pil, but he said he wasn't worried and hoped she wouldn't put too much pressure on herself. However, when Jae returned to the office, her father came to see her. He advised her to go back to Seoul and find a more relaxed job, telling her not to stay here because of Sang Pil anymore. But Jae strongly told her father that he was the man she loved, so he couldn't say anything more. In prison, Sang Pil met his former close associate, a subordinate of Uncle Dae. He explained that he hadn't killed Uncle Dae, but the man said that if he couldn't prove himself, he would die. The next morning, Sang Pil's first trial was about to begin. Jae, returning to her role as a lawyer after a long time, hadn't had time to prepare a more formal suit. Surprisingly, her father personally brought her an outfit. He wasn't there for Sang Pil, but for his daughter. The trial began, with the prosecution continuously presenting evidence to incriminate Sang Pil. Furthermore, the murder weapons at the scene all bore his fingerprints. They even prepared a false witness to corner Sang Pil. In court, the witness was brought in. He claimed to have seen Sang Pil push Uncle Dae down the stairs, but when Jae asked him what color the nearby billboard was in his line of sight, he hesitated and couldn't answer. His stammering made it possible for Jae to reject his testimony due to suspicion of witness perjury. The trial adjourned for jury deliberation. 10 minutes later, the trial resumed. Prosecutor Jung presented further evidence against Sang Pil, Uncle Dae's insurance policy, but Sang Pil was listed as the policyholder. The motive for the murder was likely to claim the insurance money. The first trial ended completely unfavorably for Sang Pil. That evening, Jae took Chief Tae and Chia's home to retrieve some items. Unexpectedly, her mother, Hun-ju, also came. She claimed she wanted to take photos to revisit her old home and spend more time with her daughter. Since the shop was closed and her father was out, Jae had to take the photos for Hyun-ju. Hun-ju wanted to leave an envelope for Jae while she went to print the photos. However, Jae's father returned, causing her to panic and leave before she could do anything. The next day, she came to see her daughter again, claiming she was the one who massaged Moon Suk. Then Hyun-ju gave Jae the envelope she had intended to leave the day before. Looking at the stack of photos inside, Jae couldn't help but be astonished. They were clear photographs showing Oh-ju helping Moon Suk commit murder years ago. In prison, Sang Pil once again sought help from the Scorpion, but the trial's outcome left the Scorpion unable to trust Sang Pil anymore. As soon as they met, the Scorpion beat Sang Pil mercilessly. To quell the Scorpion's anger, Sang Pil allowed him to stab him in the stomach with a toothbrush handle. Just then, two other inmates arrived, and they fearfully ran to call the guards. Sang Pil, suppressing his pain, urged the Scorpion to leave quickly. Sang Pil was rushed to the emergency room. Jae was stunned by the news. She silently prayed that he would overcome this ordeal. Outside the emergency room, Jae trembled and could barely stand, but she still bravely reassured everyone that everything would be all right. News of Sang Pil being stabbed in prison spread. Even Oh-ju suspected that his subordinate had sent someone to kill him. The subordinate vehemently denied it, saying he didn't dare kill Sang Pil, but had followed Oh-ju's orders to let him confess before killing him. At this point, point, Moon-suk suspected Oh-ju, while he suspected her. Internal conflict and distrust arose. At the hospital, a miracle occurred. Fortunately, timely emergency treatment saved San-pil from critical condition. Everyone was overjoyed to hear this, and Jae-yi finally breathed normally again. Jae-yi, using her lawyer's credentials and permit, was allowed to visit San-pil. Seeing the man she loved having just survived a life-or-death situation, she was heartbroken. She vowed to herself that she would quickly get him out of prison. He slowly opened his eyes. He smiled at her, easing her worries. The next day, Oh-ju personally came to the hospital to see Sang-pil. Every time they met, it was either a threat or a provocation, so Sang-pil was no stranger to it. After Oh-ju left, he encountered Prosecutor Jung. The two were enemies, so while they outwardly smiled and were polite, their words were incredibly sharp. Today, Prosecutor Jung even brought a scorpion with him, so Sang-pil could confirm if it was the person who stabbed him. But Sang-pil stubbornly defended the scorpion, saying that the person who stabbed him was small and not muscular like this. This made the scorpion extremely uncomfortable. The next day, Jae-yi visited Sang-pil and pushed him outside for some fresh air to relieve the stuffiness. The investigating officer in charge followed them to the prison. Everyone from the detective agency came to visit their boss, making San-pil much happier. When he returned to the hospital room, Jae-yi showed San-pil a stack of photos she had received from a strange woman. Looking at these photos, San-pil was extremely surprised. This person must be the same as his mother, who had investigated the case years ago. Meanwhile, Hyunju was still massaging Moon-suk at her private residence. Lately, she had been very unhappy with Oh-ju and didn't want him to come to her house without permission anymore. But he appeared right outside the door. He said he came to explain and listen to the explanation to avoid misunderstandings. Hyunju and her secretary were both chased out. When it came time to pay for the day's work, the secretary threw all the money on the ground, making Hyunju pick it up while saying thank you. Later, the secretary threatened Hyunju, telling her to pretend to be deaf no matter what she heard, or her life would be in danger. The next day was the cover photo shoot for Moon-suk's new book, so Jae's father prepared very early. No matter how much his daughter pleaded, he refused to believe her, leaving her utterly helpless. During the photo shoot, in order to get the best cover, Jae's father carelessly moved some things, breaking Moon-suk's precious earthenware vase, but she just said to clean up quickly so they could shoot. Jae's parents were so close, yet he still didn't recognize his wife. Moon-suk didn't seem to notice anything, but suddenly she mentioned Jae's mother, causing her to flinch slightly. Unable to suppress her longing for her daughter, Hyunju texted her to arrange a meeting to talk about a few things. After 18 years of separation, the mother struggled to hold back her tears. She talked about some things related to the photos and hinted at wanting to relive her life. Facing a stranger, Jae-yi felt an overwhelming sense of trust in her. At the hospital, she told Sang-pil that if he didn't trust her, he should trust her. This showed just how much faith she had placed in this woman. As soon as Jae-yi left the hospital, Oh-ju arrived to visit Sang-pil. Unexpectedly, In-nam's henchman, following Moon-suk's orders, also came to the hospital to eliminate Sang-pil. The boss's appearance was completely unexpected. The henchman called In-nam to ask how to handle the situation. Moon-suk signaled to kill everyone without mercy. Caught off guard, Sang-pil and Oh-ju had no choice but to cooperate to deal with the group in the room. Afterwards, Oh-ju untied Sang-pil. After dealing with that group, another group arrived, forcing them to flee to the elevator, but the doors closed too slowly, giving them time to rush in. They were all trapped inside the elevator. A long fight ensued, and in the end, only 2 people remained standing. Sang-pil hinted at the person behind the incident, but Oh-ju quickly guessed. Afterward, Sang-pil returned to the office with his injuries. Seeing him like that, Jae almost burst into tears. His subordinates anxiously wanted to call for an ambulance, but Jae stopped them. She stared intently at Sang-pil, making a phone call. As a martial artist, she understood that he was a criminal, and whatever his reason for fleeing, it would be used against him in court. A short while later, Prosecutor Jung arrived. Because Jae had reported the incident in time, he didn't prosecute Sang-pil. Moon-suk looked at the masseuse in front of her, recalling Ko In-nam's words. Before leaving, Uncle Dae had tasked him with finding a Korean woman living in Thailand. Coincidentally, the masseuse in front of her had just returned from Thailand. Therefore, Moon-suk couldn't help but be suspicious. Soon after, the newspapers reported on the brawl at the hospital. Oh-ju hurriedly instructed his subordinates to arrange for the media not to mention his name. Having been under pressure for so long, Boss Choi couldn't take it anymore. He went berserk. The freedom of being a thug before was immense, but now being confined within such constraints was exhausting. Normally, Oh-ju would have gone mad at the complaints, but this time he remained unusually calm, having awakened to a realization. From the beginning, Moon-suk's appointment of him as mayor was part of a pre-planned scheme. Her intentions were clear when she took over the Ozu Corporation, yet he hadn't realized it. Now, only because of a subordinate's words, he was gradually coming to his senses. Today was the second trial of Sang-pil. Before that, Jae received a mysterious phone call. After listening, her expression darkened. She told Sang-pil that he might be frightened today, but that was okay, because she would do everything in her power to prove his innocence. The trial began. Jae requested the addition of a new witness. The court doors opened, and a witness appeared, surprising everyone. Oh Ju testified. It turned out that Jae and he had spoken earlier. He wanted to testify for Sang-pil in court. Jae was hesitant because he was her and Sang-pil's main enemy. But in court, everything was a gamble, a decisive one, so why not try? Therefore, she agreed to let him testify. Prosecutor Yeon-hee began questioning why Oh-ju insisted Sang-pil didn't kill Uncle Dae. He frankly replied that the real culprit was his bodyguard. Everyone present started murmuring. He expressed regret that Sang-pil had threatened him, causing the bodyguard to harbor resentment and create this tragedy. At that moment, the prosecutor also received news that someone had come to the police station to confess. Afterward, Oh-ju bowed to the public. First, he apologized to Sang-pil for his delay in advising the bodyguard. Next, he pleaded for leniency for his loyal bodyguard. After saying this, he even sincerely knelt on the ground to express his sincerity. Although Oh-ju was on Sang-pil's side, he couldn't bear to hear these words. Since someone had confessed and the city mayor himself had testified, Moon-suk had no choice but to declare Sang-pil innocent. This move unexpectedly turned out to be the right one, because the newspapers and media were now full of news praising him for willingly bowing before the entire nation to plead for a reduced sentence for his loyal bodyguard and honestly confessing to save an innocent person. Some even compared him to Moon-suk, causing her considerable distress. To celebrate Sang-pil's release from prison, everyone gathered on the beach to eat and drink. Jae stood in a corner, deep in thought, recalling Moon-suk's earlier words. She wanted Jae to help Sang-pil get acquitted, but when Jae asked why, Moon-suk said she would only reveal it when she succeeded. Now that she succeeded, what exactly is Moon-suk's reason for wanting Sang-pil innocent? Sang-pil couldn't answer either, so Jae had to go to Moon-suk. But Moon-suk refused to reveal the reason, claiming Jae hadn't negotiated to win the case herself. Jae then asked Moon-suk what her purpose was in helping her regain her law degree. Unexpectedly, Moon-suk said she wanted Jae to succeed her. She wanted to groom her, but Sang-pil's appearance turned everything upside down. If she were the innocent child she once was, Jae might have been seduced by these sweet words. But after discovering her hideous nature, all of Moon-suk's flattering words had no effect on Jae anymore. Suddenly, Moon-suk asked one last question that left Jae speechless. Moon-suk asked if Jae could become the Jae she used to be if her mother were still alive. Touched by the painful memory, she warned Moon-suk not to joke about the people important to her. Actually, Moon-suk wasn't sure if the massage therapist was Jae's mother. So the next day, Moon-suk deliberately arranged an important meeting with the 7-person group in front of her. Afterward, she went to see the boss, asking Oh-ju if he had the guts to betray her. He had his own plans and couldn't be disrespectful yet. He started acting submissive in front of her, then produced a photo from the day of the murder. He said someone had sent it to threaten him, saying if he didn't testify in court, they would release it online. He wasn't afraid of losing his mayoral position, only that Moon-suk's reputation would be affected, so he couldn't refuse to testify. That's why Moon-suk let the matter rest. At this time, Hyunju went to Jae and told her that Moon-suk had an important meeting at the local club at 3 p.m. the next day. Just then, Sang-pil returned. Hyunju, fearing exposure, wanted to leave, but her daughter held her back, comforting her not to be afraid of Sang-pil. Jae asked if she knew Sang-pil's uncle. She didn't dare look Sang-pil in the eye and replied that he had helped her before. Therefore, as a way of repaying him, she was now helping them find evidence to bring down Moon-suk. Afraid that the more she talked, the more information would be revealed, she made an excuse to leave. According to the information Hyunju provided, Sang-pil began to explain the situation, time, and location to everyone. Since the others had already been exposed, this mission would be divided among them. The energetic woman disguised herself as a golf course employee serving Moon-suk. The person she met was Representative Jo, an ambitious man currently running for president. Moon-suk, on the other hand, was a well-known judge, hence their close relationship. This time, she agreed to support Jo on the condition that he help her secure a seat on the Seoul Supreme Court. The entire conversation was recorded by a wiretap installed in a nearby car, which Sang-pil and Jae listened to. Not long after, at another trial presided over by Moon-suk, she sentenced a rapist to death. South Korea doesn't have the death penalty, so the criminal was so shocked by the verdict that he caused a disturbance in court. But Moon-suk's eyes remained cold and unwavering. Outside, she put on a facade, telling the press that she didn't care about the Supreme Court judge position. She only wanted the guilty to receive their punishment. Then she went to the statue of her great father, proudly boasting that she was about to surpass him. She had lived her whole life under his shadow, which was the reason her true nature had gradually become distorted. At this point, Sun Pil appeared. He only wanted to say that it wouldn't be long before she would be sitting in the defendant's chair in Ki-sung's court. At this time, Oh-ju had arranged to speak with his secretary. Since deciding to confront Moon-suk, he seemed to have become smarter. He knew how to exploit the secretary's unwavering devotion to her daughter, telling her that once Moon-suk left Ki-sung, no one would help her anymore. Therefore, if she wanted her daughter to live peacefully, she had to side with him. She found it reasonable and intended to comply, but her long-standing loyalty hadn't crumbled yet. She cautiously approached her boss and asked if Moon-suk really intended to leave Ki-sung. Moon-suk, seeing her subordinate daring to probe her, angrily shouted. The secretary didn't dare ask any more questions. Moon-suk's goal was the position of Chief Justice of the Seoul Supreme Court, a position she had always refused before, so why would she want it now? But, in any case, she couldn't be allowed to leave Ki-sung so easily. Sun Pil and Jae went to find the female reporter, who was always ready to deliver any kind of sensational news about the powerful without fear of being fired or retaliated against. Sun Pil gave her the photos of Moon-suk's murder from years ago and asked her to publish them in the newspaper to let everyone know the true face of Moon-suk, whom they always respected. At this time, Moon-suk was unaware of the trouble that was about to come. She still held the party, but this time, the boss wasn't present. The secretary deliberately mentioned his name, making Moon-suk uncomfortable. The secretary, worried that her daughter was about to lose her position, secretly contacted Oh-ju. He promised to help prosecutor Yun Hee-well, so the secretary agreed to cooperate with him. The next day, news of Moon-suk's murder appeared in all major and minor newspapers, causing a stir among the people. The area outside the courthouse was packed with reporters. Moon-suk didn't expect this to be leaked, but she understood she couldn't avoid it, so she answered the reporters' questions as cleverly as possible, neither admitting nor denying, waiting for the answer after the upcoming trial. She still wanted to show that she put her work first. Oh-ju was present in the photo that had been obscured. He remembered Sun Pil saying that he would only consider him after Moon-suk was dealt with. It seemed Sang Pil's leak had hit two targets. One was targeting Moon-suk, and the other was threatening Mr. Jung. In any case, the first move had succeeded, and everyone in the detective agency had reason to celebrate. Afterwards, Sang Pil secretly went to see Jae's mother alone. He thanked her for the photos that had helped him and Jae so much, but then he asked her not to try to approach Jae again because he couldn't trust anyone whose identity was unknown. Seeing this, she revealed her true identity. Sang Pil was extremely surprised, but what was special was that the woman before him was also his savior from years ago. He was moved to tears, relieved that she was still alive. She asked him to keep it a secret. When the time was right, she would tell her daughter her true identity. Then she asked Sun Pil to stay away from her daughter, because after observing her for a while, she realized that her daughter would not be safe by his side. This was very cruel, but she hoped he would understand a mother's feelings. Sun Pil loved Jae, so he didn't know how to respond. Then he went to find the Scorpion. There, the Scorpion told Sang Pil that he went to prison on Uncle Dae's orders to protect Sang Pil. This made Sang Pil think of Jae, so before leaving, he decided to teach her how to protect herself. At this time, Moon-suk was very worried about the news when Representative Jo called. He warned her to either remove the news or provide a satisfactory explanation. Otherwise, she shouldn't even think about the Supreme Court's trial seat. He gave her only one day to deal with the issue. Cornered, she suddenly came up with a new idea. The next day, she proactively held a press conference, saying that a few days earlier she had received an anonymous threatening video. Now, with these photos, she believed that some organization or group had planned to prevent Ki-sung from becoming Logan City. Therefore, she had